hopefully we won't have too many people miss out on the start. So really, thank you very much for joining me today. My name's Will Huggins. I've been involved with the Drupal community for about 10 years now. I founded a Drupal agency called Zucha, mainly in the UK, but we also work throughout Spain and the US and Brazil. We kind of very much involved with contributing to the Drupal community. And one of the things that I wanted to do as part of DrupalCon Global was to talk about project discovery, because it's something that we've really learned a lot about, particularly over the last few years, working with lots of different types of clients, and also analysing when projects don't really go right. So yeah, today we're going to talk about discovery and why getting discovery right can build the foundation for successful projects. We're going to start with a kind of trip back in time to look at a lesson from history when not thinking about discovery was a real costly mistake for one brand. We're also going to then look at the role of discovery. So what does discovery mean? And we're going to look at it also in the context of how Agile has evolved, and what does that mean for discovery? I want to kind of talk through some tools as well for using when we're undertaking discovery, and trying to use those tools to make sure that we really understand what we're doing before we go into the later phases of projects. And then I'm going to finish with another example of when, in contrast to the first trip back in time, when actually a successful discovery phase underpinned a successful project delivery. So our kind of presentation really starts with this trip back in time to 1996, and we are in Oak Brook, Illinois, at the McDonald's headquarters, and it's been another really bad board meeting. No one's really happy with the performance, and in particular, market share has been falling, and both Burger King and Wendy's share has been rising. Burger King is perceived by the board to have stronger quality values. Wendy's is perceived to have a more sophisticated menu. And the CEO remarks to the board that even his son's family have stopped eating at McDonald's. So with those perceived competitive strengths and anecdotal feedback, the board move into action the McDonald's corporate machine to find a solution for their problem. And the solution they come up with is the Arch Deluxe. People who are as old as I am can probably remember what that looks and tastes like, but it's basically a more gourmet style burger with Dijon mayonnaise, fresh tomato, and it was ideally kind of placed in the minds of the McDonald's executives to take on the flame grilled Whopper and the kind of more extensive menu that Wendy's offered. They didn't go half-assed at this. They decided to take this one on head-on, and so they stuck behind it $100 million record-breaking advertising budget. So really, no product launch had ever seen this kind of expenditure before. But you know, they thought this was going to turn around their market share problems and deliver them an extra $1 billion of revenue a year. So kind of 100 million felt right. But then 100 million turned into 150 million, and things were still not quite working. And to put it in the slightly sanitized words of the board at the time, the Arch Deluxe failed to meet expectations. And basically within a year, they started to roll back the product, and within 4 years, it had completely disappeared from menus around the globe. And to kind of underpin the failing, it's really interesting to see some of the quotes from the executives at the time. So different board members had different views. The executive chef who developed the product, maybe predictably, blamed it on price and said it was too expensive. One of the board directors said it was too different for the McDonald's audience to accept. Another board director said it was not different enough, and actually they should have been more radical. And so not only did this highlight the fact they didn't know why their solution had failed, it shows they didn't even understand the problem they were trying to solve. They'd kind of taken this huge budget and this energy of fixing their problem straight to the solution phase. And I'm sure they did loads of research with people, but by that point, their research was all about the solution. They hadn't really thought about the problem. So what does this mean for discovery? Well, discovery really is all about the problem. And in the words of one of the 20th century's great thinkers, Einstein said, given an hour to solve a problem, he'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes just thinking about the solution. Discovery is all about the problem. That's where we live with discovery. We live in the problem, and really we're not interested in solutions. We want to understand what is wrong or what needs to be done and why, and then we can start thinking about the how and the what of the solution. So to put it another way, the role of discovery is to ask that question, is to ask why. To understand what we're doing really requires you to ask why. And that gives you the platform then to decide how you want to do it and what the solution will be. If you don't do that, you then start creating this kind of self-fulfilling loop of justifying what the solution is going to be and why you've picked it. So the context of discovery, I think, is really interesting in the evolution of Agile, because I think a lot of people assume, and I certainly used to, that if you're using Agile, kind of discovery is part and parcel of Agile. We all know the playbook, and so if I'm doing Agile, I'm doing discovery, and everything will be good. But actually, there's a lot of myths to that. And the history of Agile has developed in such a way, I think, that, kind of even back before McDonald's launched their Arch Deluxe, we kind of started to see things like Scrum emerge, and then they were followed by extreme programming, feature-driven development, culminating really in 2001 with the Agile Manifesto, promoting individuals above process, making things work ahead of documentation, etc. And kind of, all the way through to not too many years ago when Eric Ries wrote The Lean Startup, again, a real Bible for a lot of people like me who are passionate about Agile. But really, a lot of these things evolved to think about the how and the what. There still weren't a lot of things to think about the why. Even the tools, so there's such great tools around for delivering Agile projects. Many of these I'm sure you're familiar with. There's many more that are really excellent ways. But again, they very much focus around the how and the what. There aren't that many tools and structures that really help us to figure out the why. Again, a lot of you will probably be familiar with this double diamond approach, and again, this for me, really clearly summarizes the process. And for me, what it's about is the first half of a project really is all about the problem. It's all about the why. It's to discover and define the problem. But a lot of, I think a lot of people interpret it differently, and I'd be very surprised. I mean, we don't have to go to the extreme of Einstein and go 55 minutes to 5 minutes in terms of ratio, but I'd be very surprised how many projects have the resources and time apportioned 50% between discovery and delivery. And that lack of structure and that kind of confusion that I think has been generated in the Agile evolution of Agile methodologies has created the risk of getting discovery wrong. So not doing it. We kind of know and we get told in the methodologies that we need to do it as part of the sprint planning and defining user stories. But there is a real risk that we get it wrong. Confirmation bias discovery is one of the reasons that crops up many times. So this is where you kind of think you know what the answer is and what the solution should be, and so all of your testing and all of your discovery is really just around justifying a decision you've already made at the start of the project. Partial team discovery is one of the most common, and again, I'll talk about this a little bit later on, in that one of the biggest things about discovery is involving a team that encompasses all of an organization, all of the stakeholders and all of the users that are going to be affected, so that you have a much more holistic view of where the problems lie and what solutions you need to find in order to solve those problems. Outsource discovery is a really big one, I think, for organizations where they kind of think, they can pay a consultant or an agency or a specialist to come in, tell them what to do, and then they can go away and do it. Well, actually, again, that kind of is looking at it the wrong way around. Is, the problems are their problems, and it needs some self-reflection as part of that kind of bigger discovery team to be able to identify them. And the other one, which I'll talk about a little bit more towards the end, is this notion of a big bang discovery. So like, at the end of discovery, that's it, my work's done now. We can send the researchers home. The business analysts can kind of focus on articulating user stories and requirements. But actually, this is completely the wrong way to look at it. Discovery is happening all the time. We're learning all the time. People are changing all the time. So really trying to embed a notion that discovery runs throughout the process is a really important part of how to make discovery work. And again, it all makes sense. People, great thinkers have said it, and this one characteristically in few words: if you define the problem correctly, you almost have the solution. So, in other words, get discovery right, and you'll have the foundation to deliver successful solutions. So kind of some of the tools I wanted to talk through. So these are the things that we use regularly, I use regularly to try to make sure that we're getting discovery right, we're asking the right questions, and we're building a platform to go on and deliver the right solutions. So the first one is that one about the team. So assembling the right team and nurturing this cross-functional collaboration is such an important part of Agile, but it's really an important part of discovery. And again, I think the partial team discovery problem crops up so many times where maybe the developers get involved too late, they don't really understand the context of the problem that they're trying to solve, or researchers leave the project after discovery and kind of hand off to someone else. It just doesn't work. You need this really collaborative one team approach to make sure that discovery builds that foundation of insight and understanding on which you can build good solutions and deliver successful projects. Communication, really, this is the one. You've got to listen to end users. You've got to listen to stakeholders. The team members within the team, a lot of the insights from discovery will come from the team members that are working through, whether they're focused on user research, whether they're focused on internal stakeholder management. They will be the ones that are driving these insights and making sure that you're listening to them throughout the team, throughout that process is really important. Just a quick diversion. I see someone's asked about the link to the slides. I will share that with you all before you go. I think at the moment it's just on a private Google Slides, but I will make it public and share that at the end. Final tip on the communication: work really hard to reach marginalized groups. This is really important for lots of reasons. One, because they're voices that aren't often heard, but also the more you listen to the voices of marginalized groups, the more you hear issues and problems that maybe go unnoticed or are buried or hidden from view by doing more broad sweeping research or insight gathering. And actually, I find some of the most useful insights, not just for communicating with and delivering solutions for marginalized groups, but for all of the audiences that you're communicating with, come from those groups, because they are acutely aware of solutions that fail for them. They really help you to understand how solutions can be delivered to be successful for everybody that's accessing them. Impact mapping. So some of these will be either examples of methodologies that you're familiar with or you use, or variations. There's lots of different flavors of these tools, and I think the key is to really experiment and make sure that you're kind of picking the flavor that works best for you. I like impact mapping because it keeps the problem at the center. So it's like, what are we trying to do here? Why are we trying to build a solution? It then puts the user next. So it's outcome orientated, but it's also user centered. And what's really good about it, when you kind of map the problem, who you're trying to fix the problem for, what the impact of solving that problem is and what the potential solution is for all of the different users, all of the different problems and all of the different impacts and solutions, you start to highlight assumptions, and you start to highlight where your assumptions are built on weak or on strong insights, and it really helps to guide that ongoing discovery piece. It's also a really quick way of helping to kind of map where you want to focus the resources that you have within the project. User story mapping, this is really, user journey mapping, this is really commonly used in Agile. And again, what's great about it is user-centric. It really encourages collaboration and it demands research. You can't do user journey mapping without talking to the users that are undertaking those journeys or trying to achieve those objectives or reach those goals. It also has a really visual output. User journey mapping is a great way of communicating to stakeholders about what the insights from users have told you and why you're developing, designing, and working on the solutions that you are. User story mapping, so this is kind of the next level down. So at individual user story level, making sure that everything's, again, outcome orientated. So what problem am I trying to solve? User-centered prioritization, so thinking not just in terms of the hierarchy of opportunity, but then hierarchying the problems by users. Focusing on end-to-end journeys, so again, making sure that you're not looking at problems in isolation, but understanding a more holistic view of what problems people face and what they're trying to achieve with the services that you're designing for them. And again, you know, the great thing about user story mapping and why it's so popular in Agile is it's a really fast, efficient way of planning what it is you want to do and kind of moving into those delivery stages. And then finally, embedding these tools and behaviors as part of an ongoing process. So rather than having discovery, again, one of the other words I hate about that's sometimes used for discovery is pre-work, like the real work happens later, but you know, we'll just do some pre-work. You know, it's completely the wrong way of looking at it. Discovery is always going on. Discovery is so important to underpin the insight and the information needed for the delivery phase to be successful. So just to kind of give you an example of making it happen. So this was a learning journey that we were on for the last couple of years, really. And the story starts kind of getting back into our time machine and going back to 2012 at this time. And the Olympics is coming to London. My home city, almost. I live just outside. And you know, hosting a mega event is a huge undertaking, and one of the big challenges for the city it was to mobilize volunteers to help deliver a really great Olympics. And to do that, the city created Team London, this kind of concept of bringing together people of all ages, all walks of life to come and volunteer their time and to make Visit London, Team London and the London Olympics a great success. And it was an incredible success. It, you know, as a kind of way of delivering games, but also as a mechanism for bringing people together. And so one of the legacies that the city wanted to take from the Olympics was to continue that and to keep Team London going, so that we constantly had this energy around volunteering and making London a better place. So fast forward to 2018, there's a digital platform in place to enable people to apply for volunteering opportunities, to enable causes to post the opportunities, to enable them to collaborate with volunteers. But the motivations were waning, it was slowing down, people weren't using it, and actually, you know, it was starting to really go stale. So we assembled a cross-functional team. So we brought everyone together from across the city and the mayor's office and everyone that was involved with running Team London, as well as the development team and the design team and the researchers. And we really built this multi-disciplined collaborative team to try and understand what was the problem. And what we quickly realized was we knew the problem in 2012. The problem was we need to host an Olympics. What's the problem now that we're trying to solve? So we went back to the drawing board And we started talking to people, talking to users, talking to charities, talking to good causes, people that lived in the city, residents, really tried to speak to everybody that we could. And as a research task, that can be quite overwhelming. But the insight was really surprising, and it was transformative, and it challenged all of our preconceived ideas, and it turned all of our assumptions on their head. I mean, for example, one of our assumptions was that a lot of the expectations that people had around volunteering and reasons why they volunteered was linked to age, but actually it was completely nothing to do with age. It was all about motivation. Some people wanted to learn new skills, brush up on their kind of CV and resume. Other people just wanted to give back to a particular cause. So it really gave us a different perspective when we were writing those user stories and mapping the user journeys all the way through. I'm thinking of volunteering right the way through to turning up somewhere physically on a day and volunteering somewhere. So it's really interesting that, again, that the approach we took was all built around team, and it was all built around user interactions, and ultimately delivered a really successful Drupal project, which is always the good thing at the end of it. So what I'm going to rush to a finish now, and I just wanted to finish with one more quote, this time from Russell Ackoff, which is, successful problem solving requires finding the right solution to the right problem. We fail more often because we solve the wrong problem, not because we get the wrong solution to the right problem. And discovery is all about finding what the problem is so that we can build solutions that address the right problems. So thank you, everybody. I will take questions. I mean, I've had someone who's interested in coming up, so I'm going to add you to the session. I thought I had, but maybe you've gone offline. But does anyone have any questions that you want to ask? As I said, I will share the slides, a link to the slides straight after. Really happy for you to use them, share them. However, I really hope it was useful. So tools for the mapping phases. I have started to use, I'll give you a bit of a quick evolution of them. So we used to use Trello a lot for that. It was kind of the first place we could find where we could, kind of drag and drop cards and have a really collaborative process around working on those mapping phases. Miro now, and I think I'm pronouncing it right, certainly how I pronounce it, Miro or Miro. I'll type it in the chat. That's one that we've used a lot at the moment, and we find it, again, really great for collaborating. We've had some amazing sessions, particularly during lockdown. We've, a lot of our clients and partners are government organizations, and so, they couldn't put stuff on hold during lockdown. In fact, they got busier. So we couldn't stop research, and we couldn't stop discovery processes, and so we've been working with people, obviously remotely, and Miro has been really good for that. Some more about pitfalls. I'll come back onto the tools. I think it's an interesting one, and definitely I think people add any tools to the chat that you use, because Miro, yeah, thank you, because it's definitely I'd like to learn more about the tools that we can use. So more about the pitfalls of outsource discovery. Yeah, this one I think is key, and I'm saying this from an agency. So I'm an agency that people outsource, work to my teams. But the way that we work and the way that I try to, the culture I try to build is one that we become an extension of the client's team. So we're not an outsourced function. We're almost like an insourced resource. We're kind of, helping to build skills and capacity and capability within, within the individual clients' teams, and that's really important. We want to share knowledge. We want to create a culture where everybody's learning from the process and everybody's learning from the insights. And so I think when you do it that way, it can work really well. I think the pitfalls are when you kind of do, clients I've seen do an RFP for a discovery phase, and they expect their involvement to be, I'll speak to you at the beginning to brief you, and we'll see you at the end when you present back your discovery findings. It's kind of, I read those and I think, how on earth do they think that someone from outside the organization is going to come to it and just drop on them these insights from nowhere without having proper collaboration and a fluid dialogue with them along the way? So yeah, that's kind of, I'd say, outsourcing it completely, bad. Think of it as more of insourcing extra resources and extra skills. That's kind of how I like to look at it. So question, user journey storyboards, business model canvas, survey tools, card sorting, prototyping, user-centered design strategies. Do you use any of these, and do you find any particularly powerful? So, well, I'll start with user-centered design. For me, it's all about user-centered design, and discovery definitely is what underpins user-centered design. It's not about the assumptions of a design team or a particular stakeholder. It's a collaborative process that gets to the bottom of what the problems are, and then gives the design team something really powerful to work on that's centered around those human problems. Storyboards to an extent, but again, we tend to use these more towards the solutions end. So once we've mapped those user journeys, we maybe start to storyboard a little bit around how we want those interactions to work, maybe, and again, getting into things like prototyping definitely kind of starts to happen at that kind of once you've defined the problem, you sort of diverge again as you test different solutions. Card sorting, definitely use card sorting a lot, and anyone who thinks they can create an information architecture for a website without doing any sort of card sorting or collaborative insight gathering from users is probably deluding themselves. So example impacts you strive for. So the impact mapping, it's a good question, and I did wonder whether I should put some examples, but I mean, the one that kind of struck me as the obvious one is, problem. We need to move from DrupalCon Minneapolis, big physical event with stands and sessions and auditoriums, to a virtual user. Well, one of the users is exhibitors. These are the guys that pay money and keep DrupalCon and Drupal Association moving forward financially. So you've got problem, switching to virtual, user, advertiser, impact. So the impact is, I want to make sure that my advertising revenue is delivering a return on investment. So what impact can we have to solve that problem? And then, finally, solution. The solution, as we've seen here, is, exhibit hall. I don't know if any of you have kind of taken a virtual stroll around and had a look. I think it's great. And actually, as someone who kind of struggles, I think, to dive into the exhibit halls at DrupalCons, the physical DrupalCons, I found the exhibit hall for DrupalCon Global actually quite refreshing. And I probably engaged more with sponsors at this DrupalCon, I think, than I have at any other DrupalCon. So kind of a bit divergent there, but I hope that makes sense. So examples of continuous discovery and how it practically works. I mean, it's a really good question, and there's a couple of ways. One is what we call dual track. So kind of a little bit like the diagram that I showed on the slide, where you've got the continuous discovery, then that kind of flows down into the continuous delivery. And that can work really well, and you can have dedicated discovery sprints that operate in parallel throughout the Agile process, and that can work really well. The other way is to incorporate, this is the way I prefer, is to incorporate it as part of the backlog management. So when you're working through the backlog and prioritizing, is to really go through all of the discovery learnings and think about not just, am I prioritizing the right stories? Am I building the right things at this stage and in this sprint? But also, has my learning changed? Are these stories still right? Is there anything we've learned from testing or stakeholder engagement or collaboration that's kind of making us question this and tweak it? So for me, it's making that continuous discovery be part of the overall kind of backlog management. That's kind of how I like to do it. The biggest challenges for discovery efforts in quarantine is really about getting engagement with the right people. So recruiting research candidates is difficult at the best of time, but obviously when you throw into the mix people are working from home, many of them for the very first time, or if they don't work, their lives have been thrown into turmoil because husbands or wives are now at home, or children are not at school. So really trying to be sympathetic to people and still get them to give them your time, whether they're an end user or a stakeholder working in an organization or an external stakeholder. Really trying to get them to engage has been a real challenge, if I'm honest. It's been a great learning, but that's probably been the biggest challenge. Another question, pre-work not being a good approach. So for me, and another one that I don't like is sprint zero. I've sometimes heard discovery called a sprint zero, and it almost demeans it. It makes it sound like it's something that is just kind of something you've got to do. It's almost like the admin bit before you get the real work started. And for me, it's just, I don't like that tone. I think the better way of looking at discovery is this platform of insight that helps you to understand the problem you're going to solve before you even start worrying about how you're going to do it or what the solution is going to look like. You're starting from this base point that gives you a really good understanding of what it is you're trying to solve. Is it different from prototyping? Prototyping has a role in discovery. Again, I always would advise against not rushing into prototyping too quickly for the worry of that thing I mentioned earlier, which is the confirmation bias discovery. It's the kind of, I know what my solution is going to look like. I just need to prove to people that it's right by testing it and getting people to say that it's right. And so, diving into prototyping too soon can be problematic, but there is no doubt that prototyping has a role to play. Sometimes when you're engaging with users, bringing things to life for them in a prototype, particularly for a service or a problem that they maybe don't have a solution to yet. So there's no other point of reference to help them. Absolutely, prototyping can be a really good way of bringing things to life and helping people to visualize and articulate the problems that they're facing. The clicking noise, I think it was me tapping on the desk, I'm afraid, so I really apologize. If it stopped now, it was definitely me tapping on the desk. I think I've answered any more questions. If I've missed any, please shout out. And if there's any more questions, please do say. Also, you can find me in Drupal Slack channel. I'm Zucha Will. You can find me on Drupal.org, Zucha Will. I think obviously stuff that my Twitter and what have you is all on my profile in Hopin. So really glad you could all come, and thank you very much, and I hope you found it useful. Oh, one last thing before you all leave, and I know see a few people left. Please do leave feedback. I really, want to improve my presentation skills and also obviously deliver content that people want to hear. So really value your feedback. Please let me know what you think. The link is at the top, pinned in at the top of the chat. Thank you very much.